A legend preserved within esoteric tradition contains truths that were once communicated through symbolic images because humanity was not yet prepared to receive them directly. Such images worked upon the deeper being of the human soul, upon that part which carried the seed of future spiritual development, and thus prepared individuals to understand these truths more consciously in later incarnations. Among these legends is one that originated only a few centuries ago and has survived in many forms. It tells of a figure who appeared in Europe at the beginning of the 15th century, having been initiated into certain Eastern mysteries. This figure was Christian Rosenkreuz. Before the end of that incarnation, Christian Rosenkreuz had initiated about 10 individuals into the teachings he himself had received, insofar as such knowledge could be communicated in Europe at that time. This small circle became known as the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross. Through a wider and more outward fraternity, they later passed on a particular legend which gradually became known to the world. The deeper mysteries entrusted by Christian Rosenkreuz could only be shared with a very small number of prepared individuals. Yet these teachings were preserved within a symbolic narrative. Since its first appearance during the 15th century, the legend has been repeated and explained in various brotherhoods. It was openly recounted within larger circles, while its deeper interpretation remained reserved for more intimate gatherings. The legend relates that one of the Elohim created a human being named Eve. This Elohim united with Eve, and from that union Cain was born. Later another Elohim, Yahweh, created Adam. Adam also united with Eve, and from that union Abel came forth. Thus Cain was regarded as a direct descendant of a divine being, while Abel descended from Adam and Eve in their human form. The story continues by saying that the sacrifices offered by Abel were pleasing to Yahweh, whereas those offered by Cain found no favor because Cain's birth had not been ordained by Yahweh. As a consequence, Cain committed fratricide and slew Abel. Because of this deed, he was separated from communion with Yahweh, departed into distant regions, and established his own lineage. Adam afterward united once more with Eve, and from this union Seth was born. Seth assumed the place formerly held by Abel. In this way, two streams of humanity emerged: the race of Cain, descended from Eve and one of the Elohim, and the race that arose through Adam and Eve according to the will of Yahweh. Among the descendants of Cain were numbered the pioneers of art and science. Included among them were Methuselah, who was said to have devised the Tau script, and Tubal-Cain, who instructed humanity in the use and working of metals and iron. Within this lineage were gathered those who cultivated the arts, crafts, and sciences through their own efforts. Hiram likewise belonged to the race of Cain. He inherited the accumulated knowledge of his forebears in technology, craftsmanship, and artistic creation, becoming the greatest master builder imaginable. From the line of Seth came Solomon, distinguished by everything that proceeded from Yahweh. He possessed profound wisdom, marked by calmness, clarity, and objective understanding. This wisdom could be expressed in words that spoke directly to the human heart and elevated the soul, yet it could not itself create technical works, artistic achievements, or scientific inventions. It was regarded as wisdom inspired directly by God, rather than gained through human striving and passion. Such striving belonged to the sons of Cain, whose gifts were inherited from another Elohim and not from Yahweh. They were the diligent workers who sought accomplishment through their own efforts. When Solomon resolved to build a temple, he summoned Hiram, the descendant of Cain, to serve as master builder. During this period Balkis, the queen of Sheba, journeyed to Jerusalem after hearing of Solomon's wisdom. Upon meeting him, she was deeply impressed by the nobility, beauty, and clarity of his character. When Solomon sought her affection, she consented to become his bride. Soon afterward, she learned of the temple under construction and wished to meet its master builder. When she encountered Hiram for the first time, she was immediately captivated by him, even through a single glance. From this circumstance, a feeling of jealousy gradually arose between Solomon and Hiram. Solomon desired to act against Hiram in some manner, yet he remained dependent upon him for the completion of the temple. Then the following events unfolded. The temple was nearly finished, yet one essential work remained incomplete. This was Hiram's greatest creation, the molten sea, intended to symbolize the ocean cast in bronze and to stand as a magnificent adornment of the temple. Hiram had prepared all the necessary combinations of metals with extraordinary skill, and everything stood ready for the casting. At this point, 3 apprentices intervened. Hiram had judged them unworthy of advancement and had refused to elevate them to the rank of masters. Filled with resentment, they swore revenge and resolved to prevent the completion of the molten sea. A friend of Hiram discovered their intentions and informed Solomon, hoping that he would stop the plot. Yet Solomon, influenced by jealousy, took no action, for he secretly wished to see Hiram brought to ruin. As a result, Hiram was forced to witness the destruction of his work. Through the introduction of an improper substance into the mixture by the 3 apprentices, the casting failed and collapsed. Flames burst forth violently. Hiram attempted to extinguish them with water, but this only intensified the disaster. Just as despair threatened to overcome him and all hope of completing the work seemed lost, Tubal-Cain, his ancestor, appeared before him. Tubal-Cain instructed him not to fear the fire and told him to cast himself into the flames, assuring him that they could not harm him. Hiram followed this guidance and descended into the depths of the earth. There Tubal-Cain led him to Cain, who dwelt in a state of original divine greatness. In that realm Hiram was initiated into the mystery of fire and entrusted with the secret of bronze casting. Tubal-Cain presented him with a hammer and a golden triangle, which he wore upon his breast. Armed with this new knowledge, Hiram returned and successfully completed the molten sea, restoring order to the work that had been ruined. After these events, the Queen of Sheba agreed to become Hiram's bride, yet before this could come to fulfillment, the 3 apprentices attacked him and took his life. Before dying, however, Hiram succeeded in casting the golden triangle into a well. When he disappeared, no one knew what had become of him, and a search began. Solomon himself became anxious and wished to discover the truth. There was fear that the ancient masterword might fall into the hands of the apprentices, and so it was decided that a new masterword would be established. The first word spoken upon the discovery of Hiram would become this new word. Eventually Hiram was found, still able to utter a few final sentences. He declared that Tubal-Cain had promised him a son whose descendants would spread throughout the earth and carry forward his unfinished labor, the building of the temple. He then indicated the place where the golden triangle could be recovered. The triangle was retrieved and placed together with the molten sea in the Holy of Holies. There they were preserved, awaiting those capable of understanding the true significance of the legend of Solomon's temple and its master builder, Hiram. The narrative then passes from the story itself to its deeper interpretation. The legend is presented as an image of the destiny of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th post-Atlantean cultural epochs. The temple represents the temple of the occult societies, the spiritual structure being built by humanity throughout these cultural periods. The Holy of Holies signifies the place in which these occult communities have their spiritual center. Within those circles, the meaning of both the molten sea and the golden triangle is understood. The legend therefore speaks of 2 streams within humanity. One is represented by Solomon, the bearer of divine wisdom. The other is represented by the race of Cain, those who possess the knowledge of fire and understand how to employ it. This fire is not ordinary physical fire, but the fire of wishes, desires, and instincts that burns within the astral world. According to the legend, the sons of Cain descend from those Elohim who, during the Moon Epoch, remained somewhat behind in their development. The Moon Epoch is associated with Koma, the realm of astrality and fire. During that period, wisdom was united with this fiery astral nature. Yet 2 kinds of Elohim emerged from this condition. One group did not remain at the stage where wisdom and fire were joined together. They advanced beyond it. By the time humanity was created, they had become free from desire and were therefore able to endow their creation with calm, pure, and objective wisdom. This is presented as the essential character of the Yahweh or Jehovah tradition, a wisdom untouched by personal craving. The other Elohim retained the union of wisdom with the fire inherited from the moon epoch. From them came the sons of Cain, whose nature was shaped by wisdom working together with desire, striving, and the creative fire that seeks expression through activity and achievement. According to this view, the sons of Seth represent the religious type of human being, characterized by a wisdom that is calm, detached, and contemplative. The sons of Cain, by contrast, represent those whose nature is driven by inner impulse, enthusiasm, and a passionate striving toward knowledge. These two tendencies have been active throughout every race of humanity and during every age of history. From the desire-filled nature of the sons of Cain arose the arts and sciences, while from the Seth-Abel stream emerged the forms of piety and wisdom that are serene, reflective, and free from passionate zeal. These two currents continued side by side through the course of human development and remained distinct up to the fourth post-Atlantean cultural epoch. Then Christianity entered history. Through its appearance, the older form of piety, which had previously descended upon humanity from above, was transformed. The detached and passionless wisdom of earlier times became united with the impulse brought to earth through Christ. Christ is presented not merely as the embodiment of wisdom, but as the embodiment of love itself, a being whose astral nature had been so purified that it had become Buddhi. In this conception, Buddhi is a transformed form of desire, a purified and inverted comma. Instead of seeking fulfillment for itself, it turns all passion into selfless devotion toward what lies beyond the individual. Through this transformation, a higher form of piety began to be prepared among those who belonged to the stream of wisdom. This new piety was no longer devoid of enthusiasm. It possessed both devotion and inner warmth. Such Christian piety was gradually cultivated during the fourth post-Atlantean cultural epoch. Yet this stream was not immediately able to unite with the sons of Cain. The two continued to stand in opposition. If Christianity had taken hold of humanity too rapidly, people might have become filled with love, but the individual human heart would not have participated freely. Such devotion would not have arisen from freedom. Christ would have remained merely a ruler above humanity, rather than becoming a brother within humanity. For this reason, the sons of Cain were required to remain active throughout the entire fifth post-Atlantean epoch. Through their initiates they continued building the temple of humanity, fashioned through worldly science, worldly art, and human achievement. This worldly element became increasingly visible throughout the history of the fourth and fifth cultural epochs, expressing itself in the whole outward development of civilization. Alongside this current there also appeared the personal element of egoism, which ultimately points toward the conflict described as the war of all against all. Although Christianity had entered the world, its deeper meaning remained, in a sense, known only to a limited number. Nevertheless, it introduced the recognition that all human beings are equal before God. This principle belongs to the foundation of Christianity, yet humanity cannot fully realize it while remaining bound within materialism and egoism. The French Revolution translated this Christian principle into worldly terms. The spiritual truth that all souls are equal before God was transformed into the earthly claim that all people are equal upon the physical plane. In later times, this idea was expressed in an even more material form. Shortly before the outbreak of the French Revolution, a remarkable figure is said to have appeared to Madame Diadhima, a lady-in-waiting to Marie Antoinette. This figure foretold significant events connected with the coming upheaval and sought to warn against them. He was known as the Count of Saint-Germain, identified in this tradition with the same individuality who had earlier established the Rosicrucian order. His view was that humanity should be guided gradually and peacefully from a worldly outlook toward a truly Christian culture. Other forces, however, sought freedom through material means and violent action. Christian Rosenkreutz is portrayed as having foreseen the French Revolution as an unavoidable consequence of these conditions, while at the same time warning against its destructive course. In his incarnation during the 18th century, as guardian of the mysteries symbolized by the molten sea and the golden triangle, he appeared with the message that humanity should advance through gradual development. Yet he also recognized the events that were destined to unfold. From an esoteric perspective, This is presented as the path taken by humanity during the 4th and 5th post-Atlantean cultural epochs. The temple of earthly civilization, the great Temple of Solomon, has already been raised, but the element destined to crown it still remains concealed. Only an initiate could bring this final work into existence. That initiate was misunderstood, betrayed, and slain. Therefore the secret cannot yet be openly revealed. It remains entrusted to a small circle of initiated Christians. Symbolically, it is preserved within the mystery of the molten sea and the golden triangle. This mystery is identified with the secret associated with Christian Rosenkreuz himself, who, according to this tradition, had appeared in a highly advanced incarnation before the birth of Christ, and who at that time gave expression to a remarkable declaration. The figure later known as Christian Rosenkreuz was said to have repeated a particular saying at the time of the French Revolution. The words were, "They have sown the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind." This statement was regarded as having existed long before it appeared in the writings attributed to Hosea. Its deeper origin was connected with Christian Rosenkreuz. The saying, "They have sown the wind, and shall reap the whirlwind," was considered a guiding thought for the 4th and 5th cultural epochs and could be understood in the following way. Humanity was destined to become free. The incarnated Buddhi would unite itself with this freedom and establish equality before God. Yet the spirit, represented by the wind, would first manifest as a whirlwind, appearing as the struggle of all against all. In its beginning, Christianity had to appear as the Christianity of the cross and had to unfold within the earthly sphere and upon the physical plane. The crucifix, however, was not originally the central symbol of Christianity. Only when Christianity became linked with political life did the image of the crucified Son of God become predominant, portraying the divine being suffering upon the cross of the world body. This image remained the outward expression of Christianity throughout the remainder of the 4th cultural epoch and was destined to continue through the entirety of the 5th epoch of the present post-Atlantean cycle. For a long period, Christianity remained bound to the material culture of the 4th and 5th epochs, while the deeper Christianity of the future, containing the mystery of the molten sea and the golden triangle, existed only in a concealed form. This hidden Christianity possessed another symbol. Instead of the crucified Son of God, it bore the image of the cross surrounded by roses. This symbol was destined to become the sign of a renewed Christianity in the 6th post-Atlantean epoch. From the mystery of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, a future Christianity would emerge that would understand the significance of both the molten sea and the golden triangle. Hiram stood as the representative of the initiates among the sons of Cain during the 4th and 5th epochs. The Queen of Sheba symbolized the human soul, for in esoteric symbolism feminine figures represented the soul. She stood between two paths, the path of detached piety, which sought no worldly conquest, and the path of mastery gained through overcoming earthly passions and desires. As the image of the true human soul, she occupied a position between Solomon and Hiram. During the 4th and 5th epochs, she aligned herself with Hiram because he remained engaged in the building of the temple. The molten sea represented a creation brought forth through the proper union of water and molten metal. The 3 apprentices failed in this task and ruined the casting. Yet when Tubal-Cain revealed the mysteries of fire to Hiram, he gained the ability to unite water and fire in their rightful relationship. Through this union, the molten sea came into existence. This was regarded as one of the central secrets of the Rosicrucian tradition. It signified the joining of the water of calm wisdom with the fire of the astral world, the fire of passions and desires. The result had to be something enduring and lasting, symbolized by bronze. This achievement was destined to continue into the following epoch, when the mystery of the sacred golden triangle would be added. The triangle represented the secret of Atma, Buddhi, and Monas. Together with everything connected to it, this mystery would become the content of a renewed Christianity in the 6th cultural epoch. The Rosicrucians were understood to be preparing for this future development. At that time, what was symbolized by the molten sea would be joined with knowledge of reincarnation and karma. This would form a new occult teaching united once again with Christianity. The higher self of the human being, composed of Atma, Buddhi, and Monas, would then become openly understood when humanity of the sixth epoch had matured sufficiently to receive it. At that stage, Christian Rosenkreuz would no longer need to issue warnings. Everything that had previously appeared as conflict and struggle upon the outer plane would find resolution in peace through the mysteries symbolized by the molten sea and the sacred golden triangle. Such was the future course of world history as presented in this tradition. Through the temple legend and the work of the Brotherhood, Christian Rosenkreuz was said to have established a task that the Rosicrucians continued to pursue, not merely the cultivation of religious piety, nor solely the study of external science, but the union of both. Alongside knowledge of the visible world, there would stand knowledge of spiritual forces, and through the harmonious development of both, humanity would advance toward the next stage of its evolution. Discussion of Freemasonry requires first examining the spiritual currents from which it arose. Among these currents, Manichaeism was regarded as even more significant than Rosicrucianism. For that reason, attention must first be directed toward this more influential movement before any light can be shed upon Freemasonry itself. The subject is connected with various influences that have shaped spiritual life in the present and are expected to continue shaping it in the future. As an illustration of how these connections appear, reference can be made to the problem of Faust, which has often been regarded as particularly important for modern spiritual life. For this reason, the modern spiritual movement has been linked with the figure of Faust, and such references are not without deeper significance. To understand these matters properly, one must begin with a spiritual movement that first appeared around the 3rd century of the Christian era. This was the movement whose great opponent later became Augustine, although before joining the Catholic Church he had himself belonged to that faith. The movement was Manichaeism, founded by a man known as Mani, who lived during that period. It spread from a region of Western Asia that was then under the rule of Near Eastern kings. Although it began as a comparatively small sect, it developed into a powerful spiritual current. The Albigenses, Waldenses, and Cathars of the Middle Ages were seen as continuations of this stream. The same current was also connected with the Knights Templar and, through a remarkable chain of developments, with Freemasonry itself. Although Freemasonry later became linked with other traditions, including Rosicrucianism, it was considered part of this broader stream. The historical accounts concerning Mani are relatively simple. They tell of a learned merchant living in the Near East who compiled 4 important writings known as Mysteries, Chapters, Gospel, and Treasury. Upon his death, these writings passed to his Persian widow. She later entrusted them to a slave whose freedom she had purchased and granted. This liberated slave was Mani. He drew wisdom from these works and was also initiated into the Mithraic mysteries. Mani became known as the son of the widow, while his followers were called the sons of the widow. He also described himself as the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit promised to humanity by Christ. By this he meant not that he was the only embodiment of the Holy Spirit, but that the Holy Spirit repeatedly reincarnated and that he represented one such incarnation. The teachings proclaimed by Mani were vigorously opposed by Augustine after his conversion to Catholic Christianity. Augustine contrasted his Catholic views with Manichaean teachings, which he associated with a figure he called Faustus. In Augustine's understanding, Faustus stood as the opponent of Christianity. From this source arose the later figure of Faust and a particular conception of evil. Even the name Faust was traced back to this older Augustinian tradition. Manichaean teaching is often described as differing from Western Christianity, primarily in its understanding of evil. Catholic Christianity generally regards evil as a deviation from divine origin, arising from originally good spirits who turned away from God. Manichaeism, by contrast, teaches that evil is as eternal as good, that there is no resurrection of the physical body, and that evil will continue to exist forever. In this view, evil has neither a beginning nor an end, but arises from the same ultimate source as good. Presented in this form, Manichaeism may appear radically unchristian and difficult to comprehend. Yet a deeper understanding emerges through traditions attributed directly to Mani himself. An important clue is found in the Manichaean legend. much as other spiritual movements possess symbolic legends expressing their teachings. Like the temple legend, the Manichaean narrative presents esoteric truths in symbolic form, yet this legend is not merely earthly in scope. It is a great cosmic story, extending beyond the physical world. According to the legend, there was once a time when the spirits of darkness sought to invade the kingdom of light. They advanced to its very borders and hoped to conquer it. Despite their efforts, they could not succeed. A punishment was then to be imposed upon them by the kingdom of light. This detail is particularly significant. Since nothing evil existed within the kingdom of light, and only goodness was present there, the spirits of darkness could be punished only through something good. What followed was extraordinary. The beings of light took a portion of their own realm and mingled it with the materialized kingdom of darkness. Through this union, an element of light entered the kingdom of darkness like a ferment or leaven. This introduced a new principle that set the kingdom of darkness into chaotic motion. Into that realm came something previously absent: death. Because of this, the kingdom of darkness became subject to continual self-consumption, carrying within itself the seed of its own destruction. The legend continues by explaining that humanity came into existence through this very process. Primeval man represented that portion of the kingdom of light which had been sent into the realm of darkness. Humanity entered that realm in order to overcome from within what should not have existed there. Through the experience of death and existence within the world of darkness, the human being was destined to conquer and transform those opposing forces within his own nature. At the heart of this teaching lies the profound idea that the kingdom of darkness is not overcome by punishment from the kingdom of light, but through gentleness. Evil is not conquered through opposition alone, but through a union that makes redemption possible. Because a portion of the light enters into evil, evil itself can eventually be transformed and overcome. This understanding rests upon a conception of evil that views it in a particular way. Evil is nothing more than a good that appears at the wrong time or in the wrong place. An example may illustrate this. Imagine a master pianist and a skilled piano builder, both perfect within their own sphere. The builder creates the instrument and hands it over to the pianist. If each fulfills the proper task, both contribute something good. Yet if the builder were to take the pianist's place in the concert hall and begin striking the keys himself, something that was good within one context would become inappropriate in another. Thus, what is good can become harmful when it appears where it does not belong. Evil, therefore, can be understood as misplaced good. Whenever something that was appropriate and beneficial in one period attempts to preserve itself beyond its rightful time, becoming rigid and obstructing further development, it turns into an opposing force and thereby becomes evil. If the guiding powers of an earlier age, though once perfect and necessary, were to continue intervening in evolution after their proper task had ended, they would become an obstacle to progress. In that sense, what later appears as evil was once an expression of the divine and the perfect when it existed in its proper season. The Manichaean view must therefore be understood in the deeper sense that good and evil ultimately share a common origin and are related in their final resolution. Seen from this perspective, the intention behind Mani's teaching becomes clearer. Yet another question remains. Why did Mani call himself the son of the widow? And why were his followers known as the sons of the widow? To understand this, one must look back to very ancient times, before the present root race. Human knowledge was acquired differently in those distant ages. The wisdom available to humanity was largely guided by powers above mankind. It was thought that the Manu who will guide the future root race will be the first who is truly a brother among human beings, whereas earlier Manus belong to a higher superhuman order. Humanity is only gradually becoming mature enough to be guided by one who has shared its entire path of development since the middle of the Lemurian epoch. The essential process unfolding during the fifth root race is that direct revelation from above is steadily withdrawn. Humanity is gradually left to find its own path and become its own guide. In esoteric teachings, the soul has traditionally been called the mother, while the spiritual instructor has been called the father. Osiris and Isis symbolize these two principles. The father represents the divine influence flowing directly into humanity, while the mother is the soul that receives and conceives the spiritual within itself. During the fifth root race, the father withdraws, the soul becomes widowed. Humanity is left to rely upon itself and must discover the light of truth within its own being. Since everything connected with the soul has traditionally been expressed through feminine symbolism, this self-guiding soul principle is represented as the widow. It is the soul that must now develop without direct guidance from the divine source that once stood before it. For this reason, Moni referred to himself as the son of the widow. Moni was seen as a herald of that stage in human evolution when individuals would begin seeking their own inner spiritual light. Everything associated with his teaching appealed to the soul's own source of illumination and stood in opposition to dependence upon external authority. His message called upon human beings to seek truth within themselves rather than accept it solely from outside. A saying preserved among his followers expressed this attitude clearly. Human beings were urged to set aside everything received merely through the senses, and all teachings accepted only because of external authority. Having done so, they were to become mature enough to look inward and discover truth within their own souls. An opposing view appeared in Augustine's criticism of the Manichaean Faustus. Augustine maintained that he would not accept the teachings of Christ apart from the authority of the Church. Faustus, by contrast, held that no teaching should be accepted merely because of authority, and that truth must be embraced in freedom. This contrast reveals the spirit of inner independence that later found expression in the Faust tradition. The same opposition appears again in medieval legends. On one side stands the story of Faust, on the other stands the story of Luther. Luther represents the principle of authority, while Faust embodies rebellion against external authority and trust in the inner light of the Spirit. In one tale, Luther casts an inkwell at the devil, rejecting what appears evil. In the other, Faust enters into a pact with the devil. This image reflects the Manichaean idea that a spark of light enters the realm of darkness, so that darkness may ultimately redeem itself from within. Evil is overcome, not through destruction, but through transformation brought about by the presence of light. Viewed in this way, Manichaeism aligns with the understanding of evil as something that can be redeemed through its encounter with the good. The relationship between good and evil may then be understood as the relationship between life and form. Life unfolds by encountering resistance and by expressing itself gradually rather than all at once. A simple example can be seen in a plant such as a lily. The living force within the lily moves through successive stages and shapes, continually creating and refining the form through which it reveals itself. He explained that when life has created a form, it eventually transcends that form and continues onward into the seed, where it can be reborn in a new manifestation. In this way, life advances continuously from one form to another. Life itself is without form and could never reveal its living powers in a visible manner unless it took shape within forms. The life of a lily, for example, exists in one lily and continues through the next and the next. The same life remains present throughout, appearing repeatedly within limited forms while spreading and weaving through them all. The fact that life appears in such limited forms is the result of a restriction placed upon the universal flow of life. Form could never arise if life were not restrained, if it were not held back from its limitless expansion in every direction. What remains behind and appears, from a higher perspective, as a kind of fetter is precisely what gives rise to form throughout the cosmos. Everything that contains life is enclosed within a form that itself was once living in an earlier age. An example of this can be seen in the Catholic Church. The Christian life that existed within it from the time of Augustine until the 15th century was the living essence of Christianity. This life repeatedly emerged anew through the mystics and other spiritual renewers. The form in which this life appeared, however, originated from the old Roman Empire. What had once lived as the Roman state gradually hardened into form. The life of the Republic and later the Empire surrendered itself and became the framework through which later Christianity expressed itself. Even Rome, which became the center of Christianity, had first been the capital of the Roman Empire, while the former provincial officials found their continuation in presbyters and bishops. Thus what was once living later became the form through which a higher life could work. The same principle applies to humanity. Human inner life originated through a spiritual fertilization that entered humanity during the middle of the Lemurian epoch and eventually became humanity's inward life. The form within which this life functions was inherited from the Moon epoch. During that earlier period, the development of the astral body constituted the life of humanity. Later it became merely the sheath or form. Again and again, the life of one epoch becomes the form of the next. In the harmony between life and form there also appears the problem of good and evil. What was good in an earlier age joins itself to the good of a later age, creating a balance between forces of progress and forces that resist progress. This tension makes material existence possible and allows things to appear in outward form. Human existence on the solid mineral plane is itself an expression of this relationship between living soul forces and the hardened remnants of earlier life. This, too, forms part of the Manichaean understanding of evil. Viewed from this perspective, the purpose of Mani and his declaration that he was the Paraclete, the Spirit, and the Son of the Widow becomes clearer. His intention was to prepare for a future period in which humanity would be guided by the light arising from its own soul and would overcome external forms by transforming them into spirit. The spiritual current established by Mani was intended to extend beyond the Rosicrucian stream and to lead further than Rosicrucianism itself. This current was directed toward the sixth root race and had been developing ever since the founding of Christianity. It is during the sixth root race that Christianity is expected to reach its fullest expression. Its true era will then have arrived. The inner Christian life possesses the power to overcome every form. It moves through the various confessions and religious systems, expressing itself within them while remaining greater than any single form. Whoever seeks genuine Christian life can find it beneath all outer appearances. It continually creates forms and later transcends them. Its essence does not depend upon agreement in external structures, but upon experiencing the living spiritual stream that flows beneath them all. What still remains to be created is a suitable form for the life of the sixth root race. Such a form must exist beforehand so that Christian life can enter into it. This form must be prepared by individuals capable of creating an organization and structure within which the true Christian life of the future can find expression. The external framework of that future community must arise from the impulse cultivated by Mani and from the group he prepared. It is intended to become the vessel within which the spark of Christianity can fully awaken. From this it follows that Manichaeism placed great importance upon purity in outward life. Its aim was to prepare human beings who could serve as worthy vessels in the future. For this reason, absolute purity of thought, conduct, and way of life was strongly emphasized. The Cathars, who appeared prominently during the 12th century, took their name from a word meaning the pure ones. They sought purity both in their external lives and in their moral character. Through inward and outward purification, they hoped to create a community capable of serving as a pure vessel for future spiritual development. This was one of the central aims of Manichaeism. Its primary concern was not so much the cultivation of the inner life itself, since that life would continue through other channels, but rather the preparation and refinement of the external forms through which that life could one day find expression. In considering what will unfold during the sixth root race, it becomes clear that good and evil will stand in a very different relationship than in the present age. What will, in the fifth round, become outwardly evident to all humanity, that the visible physiognomy of each individual will directly reflect what karma has formed within him, will already appear in the sixth root race in a spiritual anticipation of this condition. Among those in whom karma has accumulated an excess of evil, this will become especially visible on the spiritual level. On one side will stand human beings endowed with powerful inner forces of good, filled with great love and moral strength. On the other side the opposite will also emerge without disguise. Evil will appear openly as a conscious disposition in many, no longer hidden or masked. Such individuals will even glorify evil as something of value in itself. A first foreshadowing of this attraction toward evil and the demonic nature of the sixth root race can already be seen in certain figures of genius. Nietzsche's blonde beast, for example, is presented as a sign of this tendency. The pure form of evil, however, must be cast out of the stream of world evolution like refuse, and will be relegated to what is called the eighth sphere. Humanity today stands at the threshold of a time in which good must consciously confront evil. The task of the sixth root race will be to draw evil back into the continuing stream of evolution through kindness. In this future age, a spiritual current will arise that does not oppose evil when it appears in its demonic form in the world, but seeks to transform it. In the successors of these sons of the widow, a consciousness will arise that evil must be reabsorbed into evolution and overcome not through struggle, but through charitableness. It is the mission of the Manichaean spiritual current to prepare this forcefully in advance. This stream will not disappear. It will reappear in many different forms, recognizable to those who can perceive it, though not all of them need be named here. If it were to remain only an inner disposition of soul, it would not accomplish its intended task. It must express itself outwardly in the founding of communities that place peace, love, and passive resistance to evil at the center of their way of life and seek to spread this attitude. Such communities must create a vessel, a form, for a life that will continue even beyond their own existence. From this perspective, it becomes understandable why Augustine, the leading spirit of the Catholic Church and the one who shaped its structure most precisely in the City of God, became the strongest opponent of the form that was preparing for the future. Here two polar forces stand in opposition: Faust and Augustine. Augustine represents the principle that builds upon the Church as the form appropriate to his time, while Faust represents the striving to prepare in humanity a sense for the form that belongs to the future. This opposition already took shape in the 3rd and 4th centuries of the Christian era and continues in different forms through history. It appears in the conflict between the Catholic Church and movements such as the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, Albigenses, and Cathars. These groups were outwardly removed from the physical plane, yet their inner spiritual impulse continued to work. The same polarity later reappears in transformed but still powerful form within two Western streams: Jesuitism, linked to the Augustinian principle, and Freemasonry, linked to Manichaean impulses. Those who lead the struggle on the Jesuit side are fully conscious of their aims, namely the Catholics and the higher degrees of Jesuit leadership. On the opposing side, however, those working in the Manichaean current are largely unconscious of the wider connections. Only a few at the head of the movement are fully aware of its deeper meaning. Thus Jesuitism and Freemasonry stand opposed in later centuries as descendants of ancient spiritual streams. Because of this origin, both preserve forms of initiation connected with older traditions. Jesuit initiation is structured in 4 degrees: temporal coadjutors, scholars, spiritual coadjutors, and professed members. The degrees of initiation in true occult Freemasonry are of a similar nature. Both systems run in parallel forms, yet they point in entirely different spiritual directions.